Welcome back to the second segment of the BW Conference on India Central Asia Relations, Connectivity, Trade and Security, the Unfolding New Horizons. Now, this segment will focus on connectivity. India has high stakes in the stability of Central Asia as it explores what kind of role it can play and how it can reach there. India sees this as its extended neighborhood. The Atal Bihari Vajpayee government in 2002 called for a new Silk Route. Initiatives to build linkages and relevance has continued with successive governments. Now, the development of the Chabahar as a deep sea port in Iran and its linkage to the international north-south transport corridor is a strategic outreach meant to be an important facilitator of trade to and from Central Asia. In October 2017, India's first shipment of wheat to Afghanistan was sent through the Chabahar port. In December 2018, India is reported to have taken over the port's operations. For connecting Chabahar to the international north-south transport corridor, dry runs on two routes were conducted in 2014. The first was Mumbai to Baku via Bandar Abbas, and the second was Mumbai to Astrakhan, also via Bandar Abbas, Tehran, and Bandar Anzali. The objective of the study was to identify and address key bottlenecks. The results showed that the transport costs were reduced by $2,500 per 15 tons of cargo from the Central Asian region to Mumbai. Now that was the business case, but here's the reality check. The Shanghai-Singapore-Mumbai route is faster. It is 4 times the distance, but it's faster. Also, there are other challenges. Iran has not shown much enthusiasm. It does not want the Central Asian gas pipeline. Its response to the TAPI pipeline has also been very tepid. Sanctions have also played a role in reducing India's involvement in this outreach, and also its investment in the $1.6 billion Chabahar-Zahedan railway link. This segment will take stock of this major strategic outreach by India through the Chabahar port, the international north-south transport corridor, the proposed rail links. And it'll take stock on whether this has been a non-starter and what corrective action can be taken. Is this initiative, the strategic outreach, hobbled by difficulty to find basis for cooperation, and what can be done to make this relevant? To discuss this, I will again briefly introduce my very eminent panel. We have Mrs. Harjeet Kaur Joshi, the Managing Director of the Indian Ports Global Private Limited. This is India's infrastructure outreach agency. We have Dr. Sima Baidya, a professor in the Center for West Asian Studies at the Jawaharlal Nehru University, and a leading scholar and commentator on international relations. And we have Mr. Pramit Chaudhuri. He's an eminent journalist and commentator, and now the head of strategic affairs of the Ananta Aspen Center. I will first hand it over to Pramit Chaudhuri to give a sort of a strategic perspective to connectivity with Central Asia, how India has done so far, and what can be done to make it better.
Thank you, Vishal. I think the key point to keep in mind, is that the intentions, shall we say, between India and Central Asia could not have been stronger. We have excellent relations, which are both civilizational, historical. We have literally no differences between us and the 5 Central Asian countries. If you visit those countries, I was with Prime Minister Manmohan Singh, for example, when he went to Kazakhstan. There's a lot of strong personal intimacy and friendship, but the geography between the two sides gets in the way, if you wish, of anything further developing. Today, bilateral trade between India and the 5 Central Asian countries is barely $2 to $2.5 billion, which is almost insignificant. A lot of that trade depends on air traffic pharmaceuticals, for example, gems and jewelry, easy, expensive things to carry in air freight. But unfortunately, we are unable to tap their considerable mineral and oil and gas wealth. And we have difficulties exporting any of the manufactured goods or services that we are in a position to provide. And at the heart of that, as I said, is geography, as you've correctly mentioned. So that was one of the reasons why the Chabahar port was so important in building at least the first leg of a larger so-called north-south infrastructure corridor, transport corridor between us and Central Asia. But Chabahar was partly driven, in fact, largely driven, I would argue, by the geopolitical interest India had in providing an alternative supply route for Afghanistan, for the regime, the pre-Taliban regime, which we strongly supported. But the north-south transport corridors struggled because very few of the stakeholders involved, Iran included, and Turkmenistan, because it had to run through Ashgabat, were all that excited by the project. And of course, the Chinese alternative that you mentioned was there. And for a lot of Central Asian republics, that was a perfectly acceptable trading partner to work with. Today, of course, the Taliban regime in Afghanistan is one we are hostile to. So the geopolitical driver behind Chabahar is now much reduced. It's still there, but it's no longer overridingly important as it was before. However, we are still interested in Central Asia. I think as the previous panel mentioned, we now have a potential security relationship with them. We'd still like to obviously continue to trade with them, but it's also important to realize that we are now looking further than just Central Asia when we're looking at connectivity. The port of Duqm, opposite, if you wish, Chabahar in Oman, is now a matter of interest to us. We are seeing potential connectivity running instead of necessarily going up into Turkmenistan, could just go into Tehran and connect us, for example, to the Caucasus and to the Caspian area. So those are possible alternatives to the future, but at present, one has to admit that on the economic front, especially when it comes to connectivity, the drivers behind that between us and Central Asia continue to be weak. And the geography that I've mentioned that has continued to be a barrier remains, if anything, as great and if not greater barrier than it ever was before.
All right. I think we should go across to Mrs. Harjeet Kaur Joshi, the Managing Director of the Indian Ports Global Private Limited, to give us an overview of the Chabahar project, which, as I said, is a major strategic outreach, and the progress so far and the road ahead. Over to you, Mrs. Joshi.
So first of all, I'd like to thank BW Defense and the Vivekanand International Foundation for inviting me to be a part of this panel. A very good day to all my co-panelists as well as to the moderator, and of course to the esteemed audience who would be virtually watching this particular panel and this international conference. So I'll restrict myself to Chabahar, like you said, Mr. Thapar, and the importance of connectivity between India and Central Asia region does not need to be overemphasized. And the panel in the morning has also talked about the Chabahar port, which is a vital hub linking India to the landlocked countries of Central Asia. And it is definitely the key to the development of trade and economy in the region. Now, having a safe, secure, and reliable connectivity to the oceanic trades is essential for the countries to continue with stable socio-economic growth. As was said in the morning, being a single oceanic port on the Makran coast outside of this Hormuz Strait. The Chabar port is an all-weather port, which gives it a distinct advantage, particularly for India with the close proximity to the west coast of India. And of course, its strategical advantage is also there for the high potential to provide connectivity amongst all the countries, whether it's India, Iran, Afghanistan, Uzbekistan, and the other CIS countries. So the Shahid Beheshti terminal of Chabar actually has the ability to handle post-Panamax class of vessels because it's a deep draft port, and it is proposed to be integrated into the international north-south transport corridor, as was said by the panel in the morning also. So this shall provide opportunity to the Central Asian countries to diversify their export markets while also having the potential to be a transshipment hub for trade, not only with the CIS countries, but even with Africa, while primarily the transit hub would be for Central Asia. So focusing on the Chabar project that we are executing from IPGL, I shall give you a genesis of how it started, the progress we have made so far, and the way forward. So as is known, there was a ministerial level MOU on Chabar, which was signed between India and Iran on 6th of May 2015, which led to signing of a formal agreement on 23rd of May 2016, exactly a year later, in the presence of the Honorable Prime Minister of India and His Excellency President of Islamic Republic of Iran. And this was signed between the Port and Marine Services Company and India Ports Global Limited. Now, both parties to the agreement have worked together. The panel in the morning was very generous in praising that progress has been made on the Shahid Beheshti port, which has become operational from December 2018. And we have been using the existing equipment and facilities of the port and marine organization in Iran. Now, the successful operation of the port over the last 3 years was talked about in the morning as well. And this has sufficiently illustrated the sustainability of the port to play a focal point for transit and transportation of cargo and trades within the region. Now, in spite of several challenges that we are all aware of, including the pandemic, which has played havoc in the last 2 years, we have been successful in achieving some important milestones with respect to this project. IPGL has delivered 25 million USD worth of equipment, and this has been done even before the activation of the main contract, since we are working on a short lease agreement currently. 6 mobile harbor cranes were successfully delivered at Chabar, and these were in the peak of the pandemic. These were delivered, and these are soon going to be operationalized on the Chabar port. The supply of the equipment in the peak of the pandemic, as well as in other limitations, has actually enhanced the stature of the Chabar port internationally, with enhanced capacity of loading and unloading at the port. So IPGL has handled substantial cargo throughput over the last 3 years since the port was operationalized. 14,318 TEUs of containers, and the volume of the general and bulk cargo handled has also been over about 3.4 million metric tons. I'm just giving you a 3-year figure. The numbers have increased in the last 2 months over that. And in the month of November 2021, the terminal actually handled 432,982 tons of bulk and general cargo, which is the highest cargo which has been handled so far in any particular month on the terminal. And during this month, we handled the clinkers commodity with productivity norms of loading about 23,000 tons per day. So that is just to demonstrate the infrastructure and the capability at the port, which is there. The traffic of the port is being built up with an accelerating progressive rate. For example, in the last 10 months, more than 20 vessels with a capacity of over 70,000 deadweight ton have been handled in the port. Moreover, recently a regular container shipping service has also been directly established. We are hearing that, we are yet to see it, which will directly call the Shahid Baheshti port from the western coast of India. And I think this is what will be a game changer and is going to immensely add to the cargo into the port. I would also like to, Mr. Thapar, would you want me to stop here? And
no, go right ahead, ma'am. This is very interesting. Go right ahead, ma'am.
All right. I didn't want to do on my time.
Please continue.
So I would also like to mention the Ashgabat Agreement, which India actually joined in February 2018, which is a parallel positive since the agreement diversifies connectivity options between India and Central Asia and also has a positive influence of India's trade and commercial ties with the region. The Ashgabat Agreement is a multimodal transport agreement between India, Iran, Kazakhstan, Oman, Turkmenistan, and Uzbekistan for creating an international transport and transit corridor facilitating transportation between Central Asia and Persian Gulf. Why I mention this? Because a lot has been said in the morning session with respect to the connectivity and the logistics, which is currently a constraint and a hindrance. So I consider this agreement to be, that's why I said, a parallel positive, which will assist the promotion of the Chabar port. So while we've said that a lot has been done, Chabar port has the capacity to handle about 15 million tons of cargo per year. However, currently the real annual throughput is less than 1 million tons. So that shows the gap which needs to be bridged while also demonstrating the potential which is there in the port. And the Chabar port actually should be proposed as a home port for the vessel lines and for the landlocked countries, which would go a long way in ensuring that the adequate cargo does pass through this Chabar port. While the Chabar port is very strategically located, we know that the port to the north as well as the Bandar Abbas port which is frequented more often by the shipping lines and the NDs, So lot needs to be done on improving the infrastructure and the logistics, and when I talk of logistics, it is both road as well as the railway network, which will help to facilitate the movement of cargo economically and viably. Of course, INSTC integration of Chabar has also been spoken in the morning, and that is something which will really help to connect the port to the landlocked countries. And there is economics in using Chabar, but currently the total logistic cost from the west coast of India to the CIS countries via Chabar is frankly not competitive in comparison with other alternatives. The theoretical advantage is there, which would be seen provided the logistic infrastructure gets developed to the extent that it is required to ensure smooth flow of cargo from the port to the hinterland. India has been able to export humanitarian supplies, which was also mentioned in the morning session, to Kabul through the port. And the Chabar port, I would like to conclude, is part of our shared commitment towards peace, stability, and prosperity of the people of the region. Over to you, Mr. Thapar.
Yes, I have one brief query for you before we hand over to Professor Baidya, and that is, you were saying that there was a record handling of cargo in the November of 2021 at Chabar. So does that mean that the Taliban takeover of Afghanistan, that really hasn't had any impact on the operation of this on the traffic in this port?
Yes, I would like to put it on record. There has been no impact of the takeover of Afghanistan by Taliban as far as the traffic movement in Chabar is concerned. And we continue to operate at the same levels as we were doing prior to this event having happened.
Thank you for this, ma'am. Over to Professor Sima Baidya, Professor, Center for the West Asian Studies at the Jawaharlal Nehru University. Madam. Professor Baidya.
Yeah. A very good afternoon. I missed morning session because we had a seminar in our center, so I think I missed a lot, and there could be quite a lot of repetitions. So whatever I have heard so far, I will just will try to keep my talk very short, and whatever I have not heard, I will try to focus on that. There is no doubt about it, about the importance of Chabahar Port in the connectivity between India and Central Asia. And in this connectivity, all three aspects, or all three elements, like everybody I think has mentioned it already: Chabahar Port, INSTC, and the Ashgabat Agreement. Now, since we are not debating whether Chabahar Port is important or not, and how far it is important or not, so I would like to focus on something else. As Mr. Vishal has said this, some bottlenecks. In my understanding, or some misunderstanding in the psychological aspects to understand the operational part in the connectivity project. Like, for example, we have had this agreement with Iran, and we wanted that it is almost our project to develop and flourish it properly. But the way we see it has been evolved, maybe it is not of India's liking. Okay, to put the record straight, when we saw that Iran has invited China is a part of it, and Pakistan, Iran also has invited Pakistan. In my understanding, we have to understand not only from our national interest and our security aspects, we have to understand from the insecurity aspects as well from the national security of other countries as well. Now, this question will come again and again when we talk about this connectivity project. This China factor, Pakistan factor, and China factor will come in a big way. Now, if we look at the data of this trade figure, and if we compare this India and trade figure between India and Central Asia, and trade figure between China and Central Asia, it is, there is no comparison at all, that we all know. So if we see that Iran is inviting in China as well as Pakistan, we have to understand this insecurity point of view. Iran has been grappling with sanctions for many decades since its revolution. So it's insecurity. Insecurity is, is all over encompassing. So to overcome this insecurity, Iran needs friends with, for its developmental project, for anything and everything. Otherwise, it is very, very difficult for Iran to survive. Now, when we see this from India's prism, we have a very uncomfortable position, and we start thinking and we start calculating, or I would say that miscalculating things differently. The way we started thinking in the beginning that, okay, this Chabahar project can compete with Gwadar Port. This Chabahar Port can compete with the Gwadar Port. It is not like that. I think we have to, think in a different way. And this way, I must say that in our strategic thinking, we should be able to dehyphenate things. When we deal with Iran, we should not think that why Iran will be having good relations, signing big deal and the big project with China. And if Iran does this, so this is a problem for us. We should not think in that way. We should be capable enough, and we have our strategic independence, and we are really good. And I'm very happy to know from Srimati Kaur that even this situation in Afghanistan, this traffic to this Chabhar port, it did not hamper. So in my understanding, we need to change our thinking to overcome this bottleneck. Geography is important, of course, but in our strategic thinking, if we don't or can't think beyond geographies, then it's a really problem. I'll stop here. Thank you. I'd be very happy to get questions.
Thank you very much for your opening remarks, ma'am. I would like to go back to Mrs. Joshi again. Ma'am, what has been your experience in partnering with Iran in working on this on the Chabhar project and making it a deep sea port? What has been your experience so far, ma'am?
Our experience has been that they have been very cooperative, and we've been getting these short-term lease extensions because the main contract is still under approval with their parliament. But the very fact that we were able to operationalize the project, even on a short lease agreement with the PMO authorities, as they call them in Iran, we've got a lot of cooperation. They've given us their equipment to help us to operationalize the project till the time that we actually could export these cranes to Chabhar. So we've faced a lot of cooperation. We've been experiencing a lot of cooperation, and I think the friendship between India and Iran goes a long way with respect to the way the project is being executed.
So you're saying that this the port as yet is operating way beyond its capacity. The capacity is 15 times more than the traffic at this moment in time. So how is this, the operation of this port, different from the other ports which you manage, ma'am?
See, the problem in the current port is that most of these freight forwarders, which are very critical for handling of the cargo, they are all based in Bandar Abbas. So even if the cargo has to be loaded and offloaded into Chabhar, we need to use the freight forwarders from Bandar Abbas, which is not very practical, and that also adds to the cost. See, until and unless we've got these international freight forwarders being positioned in Chabhar, and we have the shipping more than one shipping line, we've not been able to have a direct shipping line calling Chabhar port. And as we know that from Jebel Ali to Bandar Abbas, the traffic moves much smoother than moves through Chabhar for various reasons. So not having regular shipping lines, not having international freight forwarders registered there, not having adequate trucks over there, warehousing facilities are also not currently available in Chabhar. So warehousing also has to be done. So all that makes the cargo unattractive to be moved through Chabhar. So once we have these infrastructure and logistic facilities available, we know the strategic advantage that the port has, but it is not being optimized, is all I'm saying. And I think that is where we all need to work towards to ensure that we are able to optimize and fully tap the potential of the port.
Pramit, you hear from Mrs. Joshi that the potential of the port has not been fully realized. What can be done to make Iran a little more enthusiastic about this, about Chabhar and the connectivity thereafter?
Well, for Iran, obviously, Bandar Abbas continues to be their primary port on that section of the coast. And in many ways, they've invested the most there. As the MDs mentioned, that if international freight forwarders do begin to register at Chabahar, then you start to see some genuine freight movement directly going there. The Iranians, I think that the heart of what has to be made told to them geopolitically, which is, I think, the best argument, because economically for them, Bandar Abbas continues to be too important, is basically that if you want to be able to build a should we say, a capacity that one is not affected by developments on the Straits of Hormuz. Right now, if Straits of Hormuz is blocked for any reason, Bandar Abbas ceases to function as a port. So you should need an alternative. Second, the Taliban regime in Iran right now are not on good terms. They are very concerned about the refugee movement, the potential for terrorism. And they themselves, especially if they do come to an agreement with the United States to revive the JCPOA and sanctions are lifted, their capacity, their needs for greater trade and infrastructure will increase. So the more ports, the merrier as far as they are concerned. And particularly if the rail link between Zahedan is finally completed and goes all the way up into Turkmenistan, then you actually have a potentially viable, genuine corridor running across one side of Iran. So for them, the argument, I think, would have to be that you're moving into a newer state of affairs. One, where hydrocarbons are not that important economically. Second, one, where sanctions are potentially going to be lifted against you. And third, you can become a transit hub for Central Asia, for the Gulf, at a time when Dubai and the United Arab Emirates and even Oman are trying to position themselves as the new hubs for the Gulf, or should we say even stronger hubs for all transit trade through the Gulf. This is a chance for Iran to make themselves much more competitive. Therefore, it makes sense to build help allow Chabahar to develop, as well as allow us to build or work with us to complete the corridor that goes up into Turkmenistan.
So there is a commonality of interests for Iran to be more enthusiastic about the development of Chabahar as an alternative to Bandar Abbas. But when you're talking about connectivity beyond Chabahar through the hinterland into Central Asia, see, Afghanistan was very much part of the idea. So now that because of the change of regime, India has lost influence in Afghanistan. So do you think that the Afghanistan leg of this entire plan, it can be ignored at the moment while you connect to Central Asia?
Well, I mean, let's put it this way. The Taliban regime, and partly because of the lack of international recognition, plus the loss of US aid that used to sustain the economy there. If you look at the latest Afghan budget that the Taliban have announced, it's about 25% the size of the Ghani government budget. It's a clear indication of how much the Afghan GDP has shrunk. They will continue to import products. They import most of their petroleum, their fuel, they import a lot of their foodstuffs. Some of that, obviously, we are trying to send, other countries will be sending as well. But yes, the Afghanistan element of the trade will be much reduced. Several years ago, when Pakistan closed its border with Afghanistan, the Chabahar port became the lifeline of Afghanistan. I remember meeting the then Afghan ambassador who was saying that, the huge amount of traffic that's coming now through Chabahar, because Pakistan artificially tried to cut it off, and it worked brilliantly. It gave them an alternative to basically coercion by Pakistan. Obviously, that's not a matter of concern for us anymore. But there may be a future in which Afghanistan's regime eventually...
Professor, how can India's strategic outreach in terms of building connectivity with Central Asia How can this be made more relevant both to Central Asia and to Iran?
Very recently, we have signed an agreement with Uzbekistan to have a trilateral arrangement with Uzbekistan, India, and Iran. I think India should, sign more and more agreements separately with Central Asian countries and, of course, collectively. And situation in Afghanistan is very, very worrisome, not only to us and Central Asia, but Iran. It is a real problem. It is as if they see that no, it is happening just there itself. So they are very much worried about it. Having said this, I must say that it can have another aspect, that it opens another opportunity to have more closer relations in terms of connectivity with Iran and with all 5 Central Asian countries. And I think till Afghanistan is very stable, I think we have to think without Afghanistan, or we have to look for this Iran, 5 Central Asian countries, and India. We have to look for different ways and means and the alternative routes. I think it's not that how we are going to make them enthusiastic or something like that, but the ground reality is such that all the countries, they understood the ground realities, that we have to think about alternative routes. We have to make it functional, and we have to work towards that so that we all collectively work together.
I was saying that you mentioned that alternatives to Chabahar and this connectivity project are cheaper and therefore more attractive from a commercial viability standpoint. You also mentioned some, some obstacles in terms of lack of infrastructure, lack of adequate infrastructure at the port in terms of taking the cargo forward. There have also been studies that it actually takes a shorter time for Central Asian countries like Uzbekistan to route their cargo through Shanghai and Singapore to Mumbai than it does at the moment through, through this corridor and Chabahar. So I was requesting you, when you say that alternatives are cheaper, can you put it in sort of cold hard figures? How much more expensive is it to do business through Chabahar?
I would not be able to give you a precise number, but I would like to say that to make it attractive, we are giving substantial discounts, which may not be sustainable on a long-term basis, but there is a VRC discount for all the shipping lines. There are free storage charges for inbound empty containers to the Shahid Beheshti port, for merely even for stuffing and carrying export. So we give 3 months free storage of mineral and building material for all custom procedures. So various types of discounts we are trying to give to make the deals sweet. 75% discount is given for storage charges on the container cargo. 50% discount is given on terminal handling charges. So those are there. And of course, if the rail connectivity, which we are talking about in the hinterland, if that comes, like you said, the study very clearly says that transiting through the Suez Canal for the Europe currently, which takes about 45 to 60 days, would only take about 23 days. So the route would be shorter by 40%. And the cost should be cheaper than 30%, but that is subject to the logistics and the infrastructure getting properly developed. So it makes a lot of good business sense to develop the Chabar port. So it's not as if, it's not an attractive, but there is another port to the north of Chabar, which is the Kalantari port. Surprisingly, even there, the cargo seems to be moving more than what it should be moving on to the Chabar for various reasons.
Mm-hmm. And what is the nature of most of the cargo which you're getting at Chabar?
Most of it is building material. Like I said, clinkers were something which were tiles, clinkers, construction material is quite a bit. We are not dealing much with oil cargo or minerals as such. It is, and of course, there has been, we've been using it for giving humanitarian aid to Afghanistan also. There have been wheat shipments through Chabar.
Mm-hmm. And of course, the humanitarian assistance is from India. But when you're talking about the other cargo, or most of it, you're saying it's mostly building material. Is this all coming from India, or other countries are also using this facility, the Chabar facility?
Most of it is, I think, from the western coast of India only. Mm-hmm. And I would also like to inform you that the MEA has also been giving this pesticide shipments to those were also done through the Chabar port.
Mm-hmm. And can we get a sense of what has been India's total investment in Chabar project so far?
So like I informed you that 25 million worth of equipment has already been supplied, and our target is about 85 million. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. We are currently a little constrained with tendering for the other equipments because most of the suppliers are not forthcoming and they don't want the bill of lading and the LC to be opened for obvious reasons. So we are trying to convince them, but the target is to do 85 million investment from IPGL.
This has been a very highly engaging and an enlightening session, and my thanks to all three panelists, for their views and comments. And it has been heartening to know that despite all the constraints, the basics for viability for Chabar, as Mrs. Joshi pointed out, are all there. And as she's pointed out, that should the necessary infrastructural arrangements be made, this can be more viable and profitable, and can be an alternative to the Suez route. This would be shorter, 40% in terms of time, and perhaps 30% in terms of costs. Mr. Pramit Chaudhuri has pointed out that more effort needs to be made to convince Iran that it's in its own interest to build up Chabahar as an alternative to Bandar Abbas. And of course, Professor Baidya pointed out that India needs to accommodate the Iranian requirement to have a separate track with China. It needs to accept that. That's what Professor Baidya has said. So thank you very much to all the very distinguished panelists for making this session so engaging. Thank you for your presence and your participation.